Today I'm talking about some of the most common challenges I faced when starting seeds indoors and the lessons I've learned to help improve my success. From watering and lighting to timing and setup, these simple changes really made a huge difference for me, and I hope they do the same for you. Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by. If you're new here, my name is Tanya and I'm so glad you're joining me today. We're diving into the world of seed starting. Whether you're a seasoned gardener or just getting your hands dirty, I hope you find some helpful tips along the way. So the first challenge that I encountered when starting seeds was watering. I made the mistake of drenching the soil and using a watering can instead of a watering mister like I have here. I purchased this one off of Amazon. By misting the soil, it really ensures that the seedlings are moistened but not drenched, which can lead to fungal issues like damping off, which is a really common fungus that kills seedlings when they first germinate. They'll kind of just start to thin out at the base and then eventually just tip over and die. Also, what happens when watering with a watering can instead of a mister is that seeds can become dislodged in the cell and kind of move over to the side or even go too deep. That can really inhibit germination and may not result in any germination at all. So watering with a mister really is the way to go and ensures success with watering. Another option for watering is using these seed starting trays that come with these wicking mats. And basically this is a wicking mat with the ends stuck down in the bottom that you fill with water, and the water in theory weeps up into this mat and saturates the soil and the cells. This is a great concept and does work. However, I have found that oftentimes the cells are more soaking or drenched in one area than the other, and the water doesn't really distribute evenly. So I end up having very saturated cells on one side, oftentimes the closest to the edge, and then the cells kind of in the middle here are drier. So this is an option to think about if you're just starting out. You'll see these sets often sold together as a kit. It's a great starter, but just something to keep in mind. You may have to rotate your seed trays just to make sure that the water is distributed evenly. This brings me to the next most common mistake that I've made in the past, following the seed depth guidelines in the back of the packet. This is a crucial step in getting seeds to germinate properly. Poppies are a perfect example. Poppies require light to germinate, and just scattering them on the surface of the soil will really help that germination rate. This is especially the case for those seeds that require light to germinate or need to be placed at a very shallow depth, like 1/8 of an inch. If these seeds are planted too deep, this risks them not germinating at all. It might actually feel a little counterintuitive to simply press seeds into the soil, but some seeds actually require this. Poppies are a really good example. Verbena and delphiniums are also a really good example, those that need to be planted just on the surface of the soil. This brings me to the third most common mistake in starting seeds. There are certain seeds that need a cold period or stratification to germinate. Think perennials or cold hardy annuals. If the seed isn't placed in a cool environment for the recommended period of time, either in the refrigerator or outside, then it's likely that they won't germinate at all. This is also the case for those seeds that require nicking or scarification in order to aid germination. Lupin, morning glory, hyacinth bean, these are just a few examples of seeds that require that scarification to aid the germination process. It just basically means that by nicking the seeds, the seed coat or outer layer is weakened, which will speed up that process of germination. Another challenge I ran into when I first started seeds indoors was not paying attention to temperature fluctuations. I didn't really realize how much temperature affects germination until I started noticing that some seeds just weren't sprouting. And that's when I finally started paying attention to the location of my seeds. Notice here that my seedling shelf is actually placed on an exterior wall of my basement. This faces outdoors. And I noticed that the seeds that were placed in the far back weren't germinating as quickly, and they were also drying out faster when they eventually germinated. So what I do now is I actually rotate my seed trays because I know that over here, it's slightly warmer than it is against the wall. So it's just something to be mindful of if you have your seedlings exposed to an exterior wall and in a basement, and if you have very cold temperatures, that exterior wall might be very cold. Another mistake I made when first planting seeds years ago is not paying attention to the ideal germination temperature range that's recommended on the back of the seed packet. Sometimes seedlings prefer a temperature that's right around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, which works for my indoor environment. That's right around the temperature I keep my home. But some seeds actually prefer a warmer temperature, some even like 70 to 75 or even 80 degrees Fahrenheit, like these geraniums here. This is where a heat mat can really be useful because it can speed up that germination process and really help the seeds produce and germinate and grow into a plant in the recommended germination time. So I highly recommend one of these. And when I didn't have these, it really did inhibit the germination rate of my seeds. A humidity dome also helps trap warmth and moisture in the seed cells, which really creates the ideal conditions for seeds to sprout. I always recommend this humidity dome when starting seeds, and this really ensures that the heat is trapped in there and these seeds have that ideal condition to germinate. The fourth most common challenge when first starting seeds is lighting. The best option for indoor seed starting is full spectrum LED grow lights like these. These lights provide all wavelengths of light that plants need throughout their growth cycle, supporting root development, strong foliage, and even bloom production as they go through that photosynthesis. Different light colors actually play specific roles in plant growth. So for example, red light is especially important for leaf and stem growth, which makes it a popular choice for growing leafy greens and microgreens in hydroponic and commercial farming setups. So for example, when I first started seed starting in my basement, I accidentally purchased a red light, not really realizing this was the incorrect lighting. I waited and waited and waited, and my seeds didn't really perform the way I hoped, and they ended up stretching and reaching for light. Only later did I realize that the red light I was using just simply wasn't strong enough, and it didn't have enough blue light in it, which is what encourages compact growth and stronger stems. This is why a full spectrum light, which has both blue and red, is really the best option for seeds because it focuses on that root development as well as compact, strong growth. One other challenge that you really want to be mindful of is ensuring that there are no dark spots in the back of your seedlings. This is a good example here. I'm really trying to make sure that all my light is facing down at my seedlings and that my seedlings aren't in a dark spot, especially in the back of the shelving. I've noticed that in the past, and it's really forced me to kind of be more mindful of this, and I end up rotating my seedling trays. Another challenge I faced when first starting planting seeds indoors was following the seed starting schedule. When I first started, I was really so excited that I actually planted seeds way too early, like tomatoes and even corn in February, and I grow in a zone 5B/6. So that means my last frost date isn't until May. So at first, the plants grew fine, but by April, they were way too large for my space, and my grow lights that I had just weren't big enough to support them, and they ended up becoming leggy and stressed. And I ended up having to plant them deeper, and they weren't any bigger than if I would have followed the seed starting schedule to begin with. Now I really make sure to follow the recommended sowing dates on the seed packets. Most seeds are best started anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date. Any earlier, and you might end up with overgrown seedlings that are really hard to manage. And the last mistake and challenge that I faced was planting what I actually need and use. This was probably the biggest mistake and one that was the most unexpected. I have planted way too many plants without thinking about the space that they would need later to care for them. When I first started seeds, I planted 100 flower seeds in a tray that didn't seem like that much, but as the flowers grew, I quickly realized I had to pot them up into larger containers. And suddenly I was out of space, and it became a huge time commitment to care for them all. So one year I had over 150 seedlings indoors, and I eventually had to create kind of a pop-up greenhouse outside because I just couldn't manage them indoors. And every day I had to carry them in and out in order to prevent them from being killed by the frost. I didn't want all my hard work to go wasted by having them exposed to too cold of temperatures. So that was a big lesson learned. Now I really have to be prepared to care for these plants as they grow because some of them may get larger and they may have to be potted up. Like these geraniums are a good example here. These will eventually have to be potted up. So as they grow, I have to consider, will I have enough space for them to care for them? And, in this container, they're fine. But imagine this times like 10 or 12 8-inch containers that require light and water and space. That's definitely something to consider. So multiply this by 10, which I've done one year, and it ends up being quite a huge commitment. So just something to keep in mind when you're first starting planting seeds. At first, this can seem like not that much, but If you live in a cooler growing zone like I do, zone 5B or 6, the last frost date isn't until May. And that means that we have quite a bit of time to care for these plants to ensure that they get the right amount of light and the right amount of water to continue to grow so they're not stressed. So just something to keep in mind, and it's a lesson that I have learned over the years. So those are the biggest lessons I've learned from my early seed starting mistakes. If you're just getting started, I hope these tips help you avoid the same mistakes I made. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more seed starting tips and everything to do with gardening. I'll be sharing more of my gardening journey with you throughout the season, so stay tuned. And of course, if you have any questions or challenges of your own when it comes to seed starting, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.